Hello, and welcome to Genealogy Plus, a program brought to you through a partnership with Ames Public Library and the Story County Genealogical Society. I'm Megan Klein-Hewett, Adult Services Manager at Ames Public Library. The library's mission is to connect you to the world of ideas, which we do through diverse and inclusive resources and programming like today's event. So with that, I will introduce myself because I am this month's speaker for Genealogy Plus, and I will be discussing genealogy resources at Ames Public Library, as well as some search techniques. So a little bit about me. As I mentioned, I'm the Adult Services Manager here at Ames Public Library, and I have over a decade of time spent in libraries. I grew up in Council Bluffs and spent most of my life in the Council Bluffs and Omaha area. But my ancestry is, once they arrived in the United States, spent most of the time in North Carolina and Georgia and Ohio and Pennsylvania. So the majority of my genealogical searching is not done here in the Midwest, or not with Midwestern found resources. I love old stuff. I love the hunt of genealogy and local history and finding records to help people answer the questions they have. And I think that there's so much value in the stories that come from genealogy and local history and helping us understand our communities better and ourselves better. So I am the sort of de facto genealogy and local history expert here at Ames Public Library because of my personal interest in both of those areas. So among the many, many other things that I do, I manage the library's reference collections for local history and genealogy. So that means selecting and withdrawing materials from the circulating collection. I manage our heritage room, which I'll talk a little bit more about here in a moment. And I also make recommendations when we receive donations from the Genealogy Society or from members of the public who have an interest in genealogy. I also spend time helping library users make use of Ames Public Library's resources to answer genealogy and local history questions. I love doing that. And I also love and spend a lot of time thinking about other resources to send folks to if we don't have what they need here at Ames Public Library. So I'm going to talk a little bit about our in-library collections, so our physical collections, our digital collections, and then when and where to look if you've hit a brick wall, if you're not finding what you need locally. So first up is our genealogy reference collection. And this is actually owned in partnership with the Story County Genealogical Society. So it's your collection if you're a member of the Genealogy Society. It started as a collection held by them. And then at one point in the 70s, it was decided that they didn't have a space or a good way for people to access it. So they asked if we would partner with them to house the collection, and we have housed it since then. So all of the books in the genealogy reference collection stay in the building. They do not circulate, but people are welcome to come and browse the materials that we have and make copies, take photos, scan. All of that is available to you here in the library. Copies are 10 cents, so they're relatively inexpensive. Scanning is free. You can scan directly to email, so that's really handy. And you are always welcome to look at multiple volumes. I know a lot of folks who maybe are newer in genealogy don't see the value in books. They think that everything is digitized. That is not the case. There's a lot of information that can still be found in books, particular family histories. For example, we have copies of grave inscriptions in Story County that hasn't necessarily been digitized. So there's still valuable content out there in books. And so if it's a place that you haven't spent a lot of time looking, I would definitely recommend it, particularly if you're running against some stumbling blocks. So this collection doesn't hold just materials about Iowa, but it holds materials about primarily Western Europe and the United States. It has both sort of general resources. How do you search? Why do you search? How do you search for these particular sort of individuals' histories? And it also has specific family histories in some cases. As you can see, covers a lot of Western Europe, New England and the Mid-Atlantic area, the South, and then the Midwest. It's not a full run of places in the United States, but we do have quite a good collection covering the lower 48 states, even if it doesn't quite cover everything. So our next reference collection is the Heritage Room, and the Heritage Room focuses specifically on Iowa. and most particularly on Ames, Story County, and the 4 surrounding counties. We try to collect books that kind of relate to the heritage of Iowa and the heritage of the individuals who settled Iowa, as well as the indigenous history of Iowa. So those are all things that you'll find here in the Heritage Room. So as I said, focuses on Ames and Story County and Hardin, Hamilton, Boone, and Marshall. We don't try to collect materials that have to do with Polk County or Des Moines because we let Des Moines Public Library do that. We try not to overlap too much. So you'll find we don't have a ton of Iowa State materials. We do have a few things, but not, we don't have like a full run of the Iowa State yearbook or anything like that because we let the university library hold those materials and refer people there rather than trying to duplicate the work that they're already doing. Some of the more unique and interesting things that we have a set of Story County plat maps that I think go back to the 1880s, 1870s. So that's really interesting if you have ancestors, you know, have a spouse who has ancestors from Story County. It's a great way to figure out what land they owned because it lists out exactly who owned which plats of land. And plat maps exist for all counties in Iowa. We don't hold those plat maps for counties outside of Story County, but you should be able to find them and get access to them. One of my absolute favorite things we have in the Heritage Room is the Ames Sanborn map. So Sanborn maps were created by the Sanborn Fire Insurance Company as a way for them to keep track of what type of buildings were out in the communities that they were insuring so that they would know how much to insure them for. And so now these maps exist as this like long form history of places, of communities that, that they had mapped. So we have a physical copy of the Sanborn maps for Ames, and you can go in if you're looking for a property, if you're trying to figure out what maybe an ancestor's home looked like, Ames Sanborn maps are a great place to start. We have an almost full run of Ames High yearbooks, which is great, and a pretty consistent run of Ames city directories. City directories are another great resource, particularly for off-census years. So if you know where somebody lived, what community they lived in, you should be able to find them in the directory because you can find individuals by both name and address. That's the great thing about a directory versus a phone book. They're listed by their name, but they're also listed by address. So you can also find the history of a place really easily. But as I said, city directories are great for off-census years because it can help you track a person across the community or give you a clue when maybe they moved to that next community that you found them in the next census. That 10-year gap helps you fill in some of those details. And finally, we have a pretty good run of Ames phone books. There's a lot of kind of overlap between phone books and city directories, but phone books are particularly useful if you're looking for a business. Say you had an ancestor that owned a business or worked somewhere for a really long time and you want more information about that business, or perhaps you want to find yellow page ads that were put out while they worked there. That's a good resource for those kinds of materials. Next is our microfilm reader and film collection. So we actually just got a brand new microfilm reader last week, which we're very excited about. Our old one wasn't working particularly well. So if you've come in the past and found an out of order sign on the microfilm reader, that's been resolved. We have a brand new one. We're super excited about it. And we're excited that we're continuing to commit to having a microfilm collection. So we at Ames Public Library are the keepers of the microfilm. That means that we collect additional copies of the Ames Tribune for the purpose of microfilming it. And we collect them, send them off in big boxes to our microfilmer, and they put those issues of the Ames Tribune on microfilm. And because of that, we feel like we need to keep a microfilm reader. But it also provides really good access to documents that maybe didn't digitize super well, which I'll talk a little bit more about later when I get into the Ames Tribune digital collection. So in terms of film that we have on hand here at Ames Public Library, we have Ames Newspapers. It hasn't always been the Trib, but we have Ames Newspapers going back to 1877. We also hold the 1885 and 1895 state of Iowa censuses. So these have both been digitized, but if you want to look at it on microfilm, we have them. Those are both located in the Heritage Room. You also have the ability to print directly from microfilm, which is the thing that I find most handy while having access to the digital version. So let me jump into talking about the Ames Tribune digital collection a little bit, and then I can talk about how microfilm is useful in that context. So the Ames Tribune digital collection is a digitization that you can access online of all of those same newspapers that we have on microfilm. It's great because you don't have to log in with a library card number. You can access it literally anywhere you want to in the world. And it is newspapers that have been digitized and are searchable from 1877 to 2020. So there is a 2-year embargo on current newspapers, which means that we can't upload essentially any newspapers in the last 2 years. Those are accessible through a different resource that we offer access to. But the digital collection is really historical newspapers, if you want to consider anything that's 2 years old historical. Our materials were digitized by a company called Advantage Preservation, and they have made available all of the other newspapers that they've digitized for other communities. And you can access those at iahistory.com. And I'll have some other digital resources to share with you, newspaper resources to share with you later on in the presentation. So the nice thing about having access to microfilm, even though we have a digitized collection, is that sometimes the quality on the digital collection isn't that great. It's not as good as the microfilm is. And that has to do with a lot of different things, including, you know, who or the quality of the digitization materials that they use when digitizing it. But it's super nice to be able to search in the digital archive and then take what you find, go to the microfilm, know exactly what you're looking for, and capture a higher quality image than you would get from the digital alone. So for example, I've had a few people who are looking for photos of themselves as teenagers in the Ames Trib. So I've been able to search by their name, find them in the approximate date, because they can give me an approximate date, find the image that they're looking for, and then go back to the microfilm and pull a higher quality JPEG that they can use for whatever purposes they want to, can reproduce it however they want to. So that's the nice thing about having both accessible and in one place. I should say that while the digital archive is searchable, if the quality of the microfilm scan itself isn't great, it makes the searching harder, because the technology that's used to convert the images to words has a hard time reading it if it can't tell what's a word and what's an image. So sometimes if the text is blurry or has been enlarged somehow, it can struggle to read it and therefore struggle to translate it into something that's searchable. So you do sometimes still have to flip page by page by page, but at least it's available and you can do it from home in your pajamas, which is a nice step. Next digital resource I wanted to talk about is HeritageQuest. So HeritageQuest is a service that we subscribe to here at the library. So you do need to log in with your library card number and PIN to log in from home. But you can log in from home, which is not always the case with all of our resources, as you will learn. So HeritageQuest is a great place to start if you're just getting started. It offers access to US and Canadian census records, which are things that are often behind a paywall. It also offers access to Revolutionary War records, will and probate records, and the US Freedmen's Bank records, which is an important resource for those doing searching for African-American histories. So it provides some really good basics. And so if you're, like I said, if you're just getting started, HeritageQuest is a great place to access some of those basic services. They also offer things like research aids, which you can see up at the top of the screen right under the title, research aids and maps. So it has some additional resources available within it that can kind of ground you in the history of a place or time that you might not really be familiar with yet. So those resources are also worth checking out. Next is the big guy, Ancestry Library Edition. So Ancestry Library Edition is available for in-library use only, which means you have to be physically present at our building to access this resource. You don't have to be on our computers, you just have to be on our network. So that means you can hop on one of our computers for sure, or you can bring your own device, log on to our Wi-Fi network and still access this resource, which is a nice touch because we often have all of our research on our laptops and it makes it easy to have it all in one place. Ancestry provides access to so many records. I can't possibly talk about all of them. It's billions of United States and international records, US, Canadian, European military records, immigration and travel records, United Kingdom census records. They really have a wide variety of records that are available. Ancestry Library Edition doesn't necessarily include everything that's available through the Ancestry.com paid subscription that you as an individual might have. But I really think it's a great resource to start if you're not really ready to commit to paying for an Ancestry.com subscription, or you only want to pay for the US subscription, you're not really ready to commit to the international one. You can access a lot of those records from the library, which is really, really nice. My personal method is to use my Ancestry.com account, which I don't have a paid account, it's just the free account. Figure out what records I might want to access by some of the hints that they give you. You can kind of just go down this rabbit hole of clicking links on Ancestry.com. Make a list of the things that I want to access, come to the library and access them for free, because you can email yourself documents, you can print off documents from Ancestry.com. And so you still have access to all of those same things from home, but without paying for it, which is really handy, especially if you're on a budget or you want to pay for a different genealogy resource. This gives you some options. I should say that Ancestry Library Edition looks a little bit different from Ancestry.com. You might be noticing that. It doesn't have the sort of integrated social features that Ancestry.com does. So when you log on to Ancestry.com on your own account, you end up seeing like your family tree. And if you've done DNA testing, that DNA testing is available on there. There are message boards and other ways to connect with people. That isn't as much of a prominent feature of Ancestry Library Edition because you're not logging on as an individual, you're using it as the library as a whole. So it doesn't have some of those personalized features that Ancestry.com personal accounts do. But like I said, you can still have an Ancestry.com account, even if you're not paying for it, to access some of those features like it keeping your family tree, access some of the messaging features, and then use the Ancestry Library Edition to get access to those documents for free. The final digital resource I want to talk about is Family Search Affiliate Library. So Family Search is available for free anywhere, which is great. It's a really great resource. It provides access to a lot of important records. It also has census records available on it, US Census records, and just again, hundreds of thousands of international and US records, more than I could possibly go through. So Family Search requires that you have a personal account to log in, so you will have to create an account. The thing that we offer as a Family Search affiliate library is access to locked records. So something you'll see when you get deeper into Family Search is some records have this tiny little lock symbol next to them. And if you click on it, you can't access it. You can access those locked records inside of our building. So there are a couple of different ways to access those records through affiliate libraries like Ames Public Library, but also through family history centers. And there are family history centers all over the country, but sometimes they have limited hours. So Family Search sort of grants affiliate library status to public libraries around the country so that folks have the opportunity to have more hours in the day to access these locked records than they might by just relying on the family history centers alone. So there are a lot of public libraries in the country that are family history or that are affiliate libraries. In Iowa, it's us and the Clinton Public Library. I know Omaha Public Library is a Family Search affiliate. So they're kind of scattered around, and there are family history centers everywhere as well. So that is always a resource that's out there. We often rely on our local family history center to answer questions about Family Search that we can't. So they are an invaluable resource in our community. The other really lovely thing about Family Search is the number of scanned books that are available there. There are hundreds of scanned genealogy books and family histories. And I'll talk about that a little bit in a moment. So some of the other services we provide include a circulating collection. We do have genealogy books that circulate. I bring them to the auditorium for Genealogy Plus every month, and they're at call number 929. We also subscribe to both Family Tree Magazine and Internet Genealogy Magazine. And those magazines are available to be checked out as long as it's not the most recent issue. And we hold up to 2 years of back issues for those. You're also always welcome to request items from us. So it's all the same form, request an item, but there's sort of two different paths that materials you request might take. So one is for new materials. So items that are published in the last year are considered for purchase. So if there's a new book about genealogy out there that you think would be a great resource that we should add to the collection, submit that form and we'll consider it for purchase. If it's an older item, we can request to borrow it from another library. Often genealogy books are, old, rare, maybe not in the best shape. So we are frequently presented with the lending libraries coming back and saying, we can't lend this to you, but we can copy or scan certain pages for you. So what's your patron interested in? So if you're requesting an older book about genealogy that might be in a reference collection at a different library and they won't lend it to us, if you can provide information about what pages you want or the names of the individuals you're searching for, that is a huge help to kind of narrow down from the go what you're looking for so we can get it more quickly, as opposed to having you ask the library, go back and tell the library what you want. For the most part, libraries will send us up to 25 pages. Some might charge, a lot of them don't, which is great. And then we have programs every month. Or almost every month, we do Genealogy Plus, which is this session, the third Wednesday of the month, September through May. And we do genealogy help sessions the fourth Wednesday of the month, September through May. And that is a time where you can gather with other members of the Story County Genealogical Society, and they can help with whatever questions that you have using their own expertise. So the thing I was going to say about interlibrary loan and Family Search is that the fact that there are so many books scanned on Family Search and available, I will often start there. So if somebody submits a request to me for an interlibrary loan, I'm going to check Family Search first to see if the book has been digitized. And not often, but frequently it has been. So it's always worth starting there. If somebody does lend us a book, it's going to have to go back at some point. They might have stipulations around it not being able to leave the building, that sort of thing. So if you want to spend more time with it, you want to have access to the whole book, not just pages that you tell them about, it's always worth checking Family Search's books section first before submitting that interlibrary loan request. Google Books, it's just books.google.com, is also a great resource for digitized books, particularly older books that are out of copyright. So this is a list of some other resources in the state. And this is kind of going to take us into when you want to look elsewhere and where you want to look. So if we don't have something, I'm often sending folks to other organizations in our community or other organizations in the state that could be of more help, because we collect a very specific sort of resource. And we try not to duplicate what other people are collecting. So you can see I have Ames History Museum and Iowa State University Library. As I mentioned before, Iowa State University Library focuses on Iowa State. So they have a lot of materials in the library and in their archives and special collections about the university, about faculty and students that work there that we don't have. So they're a great resource for those kinds of things. University of Iowa and University of Northern Iowa have similar collections and have similar librarians doing a level of genealogy librarianship. So they're all great resources, particularly if you have ancestors in those sort of areas of the state, or if you have ancestors that attended those universities. Ames History Museum, again, we try not to duplicate our collections too much. We do have some duplication, but they also hold records like real estate records for the city of Ames that if you don't ask, you might not know that they have. So they're an important resource in our community. They also digitize some of our print resources. So for example, they've digitized city directories that we hold, that sort of thing. So that's an important relationship for us, that we don't have the staff time or the technology to be able to digitize those resources. They do. So it's a positive back and forth relationship that we have, but you wouldn't know that we digitize those resources because they're on the Ames History Museum website. And there are museums, historical societies, libraries all over the country that have similar relationships. So it's always worth asking who they work with, what kind of records other resources in the community hold. I also often send people to the State Historical Society of Iowa and the Iowa Genealogical Society Library. Again, they hold records that we don't. The State Historical Society of Iowa holds a lot of vital records, and they haven't all necessarily been digitized. For example, when I was there a few years ago, they were working on getting adoption records digitized. And you can access things that haven't been digitized if you visit it in person. Same thing with the Iowa Genealogical Society Library. They have a ton of resources that haven't been digitized. So it's always worth a visit there if you're looking for materials. If you're looking for resources on African-American ancestors in the state, the African-American Museum of Iowa in Cedar Rapids is hugely important. Pella Public Library Heritage Room in Pella has a lot of information on Dutch immigration to the state. Vesterheim in Decorah does a good job of covering Norwegian heritage. Swedish Heritage and Cultural Center in Stanton, the German American Heritage Center and Museum in Davenport, and the Museum of Danish America in Elkhorn all do a good job of covering those like large groups of immigrants that came to the United States. So what do you do when you've hit a brick wall? I can tell you what I do when I hit a brick wall and I'm out of resources. So as I mentioned, my ancestors aren't from Iowa. I am the only person in my immediate family that was born in the Midwest. My parents and my brother were all born in other parts of the country. So I'm not doing research in Iowa, even though I was born in Nebraska and grew up in Iowa. So my process is to think about similar agencies in other states or counties or countries, and what is that same agency in that other state. So for example, if I were searching for records in North Carolina, which I frequently do, I would think, I know that the State Historical Society of Iowa has a state library and archive. There has to be a sort of duplicate organization in North Carolina, right? So I would search State Library of North Carolina or something like that, State Historical Society of North Carolina. And that would lead me to the State Library of North Carolina. And most state libraries and archive websites will kind of like lead you down this rabbit hole of links. You'll see like genealogy resources, and then how do I find vital records? And you click and you click and you click, and suddenly you learn that the State Archive of North Carolina is a separate organization and that they hold some vital records, but also the County Register of Deeds offices hold some records. And so on and so on and so on. So like, I always start with what I know about where I am and where I live and where I would look for a record here in Iowa, and then translate that to the other places I'm looking. I also sometimes suggest people looking kind of oddball places, because you never know what records an institution might hold. So I think local public libraries are an underutilized resource. Because we've got a lot of weird stuff that might not be on our catalog and might not be on our websites. So think about what public library serves the area in which your ancestor lived and contact them. They might have a family history sitting on a shelf that you would never know existed if you didn't ask. I also tend to frequent local tourism websites because that'll tell me what local museums exist. And then you can connect with those museums and see what collections they might hold. Again, these are often smaller institutions, same thing with historical societies, who aren't going to have materials that are digitized and might not have an online catalog that is digitized. So you often just have to make a phone call and see what they have. And then last on my list is state university libraries. Again, just like the state university libraries in Iowa, most university libraries have some form of genealogy records and also an archive that's going to cover like faculty, students, history of that university. And they also can point you towards other resources. That's the other thing. You know, folks at these organizations just want to help, just like me, and they'll point you towards other resources if they can. I'm always kind of guided by this idea of like, how can I help you think through where else you can look if I don't have what you're looking for, because I only have a small amount of space to keep these materials. So you got to look in multiple places. You can't just say, oh, they didn't have it, I'm done, because who knows what the public library in the next town over might have, or if there's a county library, that sort of thing. So like think beyond Ancestry and those sort of big digital resources, because there's other resources out there that haven't been digitized and are just sitting on the shelf waiting for you to find it. So I also wanted to share some of my favorite digital resources. So I mentioned earlier on when I was talking about the Ames Tribune, another resource, and that's the Iowa Historical Newspapers LibGuide. It's produced by the University of Northern Iowa. One of their, I think he's a journalism librarian, and he has pulled together all of the free historical newspaper resources in Iowa that are out there. So it's the stuff that from Advantage Preservation, like I talked about from iahistory.com, but it's also the stuff that's been digitized by the Library of Congress and any other resource out there that provides free access to digitized Iowa newspapers. So if you're searching for Iowa, it's hugely helpful because it'll just give you everything for that community or county you're looking for. I also think the State Library of Iowa resources are a little underutilized. So the State Library of Iowa serves basically the libraries of Iowa. It's like the library for libraries, but they also have some access to digital materials that I think is really important. So they have the Iowa Heritage digital collections, and it's another collection that is sort of an aggregate of a bunch of different digital collections. So they pull resources from like the State Historical Society and from the University of Iowa and Iowa State University, and have them all available in one place. So that's a great place to look, again, if you're looking for Iowa genealogy resources. They also offer access to Iowa digital Sanborn maps. So as I mentioned, we have the print version of Sanborn maps. The Sanborn maps have also all been digitized. So if you're looking for a community in Iowa that isn't Ames, you can access all of those digital Sanborn maps for free through the State Library of Iowa. You do have to have a library card to access them, but you can get a State Library of Iowa library card for free on their website. So if you go to that website listed there, koha.silo.lib.ia.us, that'll take you to the page where you can access those digital Sanborn maps. And in the lower right corner, you'll see get a library card here, and you can follow that link and they'll mail it to you. You don't have to go to Des Moines. It's just a paper card. And that'll also give you access to the other print materials in the Iowa or the State Library of Iowa. Allen County Public Library Genealogy Center is huge, like both in the genealogy world and in size. It's the public library located in Fort Wayne, Indiana, and they have the largest genealogy collection, maybe in the United States, maybe just outside of the East Coast, but they have an incredibly significant genealogy collection. So they have a bunch of stuff that's digitized on their website. They have a nice collection of sort of helpful documents about how to get started and what to do if you hit brick walls. They, like us, are recording all of their genealogy sessions and putting them on YouTube. So if you are interested in a particular subject, you can find that on their website or links to that. So they're just a treasure trove of information They also make it pretty easy to request information from them. There are forms on their website that you can submit to get pages of books that they hold scanned and sent to you, that kind of thing. So they provide a lot of really helpful information in Allen County. I'm sure a lot of you know about the US Gen Web project. The thing that I like the most about the US Gen Web project is, as someone who is doing genealogical research outside of the place that I live and in places that I haven't spent a ton of time in my life, it provides me with a really good grounding for the place. So the types of documents that are available in that place, the history of that place, you can break it down even by county and learn more about the history of the counties that you're searching. So if you're just trying to kind of figure out what kind of records are out there, where they might be held, they don't necessarily give you access to those records, but they'll help you figure out where you should be looking. Whether stuff is on Ancestry, whether it's been digitized or hasn't, if you need to contact the state archive or the county recorder's office, all of that stuff is helpful and can be found on that US Gen Web project. And my last resource is a kind of a cop-out, I will openly admit that, but there are so many genealogical resources out there that it's like impossible to pick the best one. So I'm just going to tell you that Family Tree Magazine publishes a list of the 101 best genealogy websites every year. So that's a great resource for the stuff that's kind of like most up to date. It offers a lot of access to diverse resources. It tells you what's a paid resource versus what's a free resource, and can maybe help you connect to some genealogy communities that you haven't thought of on the internet. And that list is available for free at familytreemagazine.com. So that was a quick overview of both genealogy resources here at Ames Public Library and also available over the web. I hope that that was helpful for you, and I hope to see you at a Genealogy Plus session in the future. Thanks for joining.